The legislative chambers, along with an automatic external defibrillator that is available on the back wall of the legislative chambers. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll begin with the agenda for the Douglas County Board of Equalization. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Boyle, Commissioner Kavanaugh, Commissioner Duda, Commissioner Kraft, Commissioner Morgan, Commissioner Rogers. Madam Chair.
Here, item A, approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, May 5th, 2015, and item B, call for a meeting and set Tuesday, May 19th, 2015 as date for hearing on certified assessment corrections reflecting the admission of omitted property to the tax roll or increased value on property.
Motion for approval.
Any questions or comments? Please vote.
Commissioner Morgan.
Please take your finger off and try it again. Up on the top button. Keep holding it until it beeps. There you go.
Motion passes.
Citizen comments. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to speak to the Board of Equalization about an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, there are 4 resolutions, items D through H.
Motion to approve D through H and adjourn.
Any questions or comments? Please vote.
I think I got Kavanaugh's voting.
Motion passes.
We'll move to the agenda for the Douglas County Board of Corrections. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Boyle, Commissioner Kavanaugh, Commissioner Duda, Commissioner Kraft, Commissioner Morgan, Commissioner Rogers. Madam Chair.
Here, item 1, approval of the minutes of the Board of Corrections meeting held Tuesday, April 14th, 2015. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments? Please vote. Keep holding it. Keep holding. That on that one,
Motion
on the bottom
passes.
one. Citizen comments. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the Board of Corrections about an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to item 3, report from the Director of Corrections.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Yeah, before you, my report for the month of April 2015, report dated 12 May 2015. Enclosure 1, Administrative Services. As we are 10 months into the fiscal year, we remain under budget. Enclosure 2, Community Corrections and In-House Programs. The Community Mental Health Center hired the first 2 employees for co-occurring disorder intensive outpatient treatment program that will be operated as a CMHC and Douglas County Department of Corrections partnership, the Criminal Justice Center, 1709 Jackson Street. They'll begin their duties in May with initial placement into the program planned for June. Corrections and Mental Health Center personnel have been meeting regularly to plan for the referral process, evaluation process, and other logistical needs in preparation for the launch of this program. I'm very pleased to see this program moving along. Work also continues in preparation for the Corrections Network. I think you've previously heard me refer to it as JLTV, but they changed their name, so it's Corrections TV or Corrections Network. Currently, contract language for 2 principal vendors involved in the project are being drafted in order to move forward with the implementation project. When operational, Corrections Network will be able to provide programming to the entire Department of Corrections campus, secure facility, and community corrections as well. And we'll be able to designate programming to certain locations, so it's not a one-size-fits-all type of delivery. For example, gender-specific programming, we can push into the female housing units or the male housing units, academic programming for those working on their GED, COG programming for other individuals. So we will be able to tailor the programming to particular areas of the jail, both secure and non-secure. I'm very excited about that as well. The partnership with Region 6, CMHC, and Corrections to provide chemical dependency evals continues to have high utilization. In fact, we're booked several weeks out, and partnership is looking for ways to decrease the wait time caused by the demand for this new service. 13 chemical dependency evaluations were completed in April. And I will remind you that this is a really good program for us, because the more CD evaluations we're able to do, then those individuals get in front of the judge, and then provisions are made for them after release, and we can open up some of those beds, and thus saving some bed days. So otherwise, they wait around in jail for their CD evaluation, and it's just taking up space in the bed when they could otherwise have their evaluation, get in front of a judge, and get along with their life. So we're very pleased with this. We just need to build more capacity into the program. 24/7 alcohol sobriety program. Douglas County was asked to present at the first ever 24/7 national conference in September of this year, 2015. Specifically, Douglas County will present on the topic of planning and implementing a new program for other communities looking to develop 24/7 programs in their jurisdiction. The Nebraska Office of Highway Safety will fund expenses associated with this conference. We're very pleased that we were able to promote this through other parts of the country. 16 new participants were added to the 24/7 program in April. Overall numbers decreased somewhat as 23 individuals were discharged from the program. 2,969 breath tests were completed in April. The overall compliance for breath testing was 99.6% during the month. 19 individuals were monitored by SCRAM, and that is the 24/7 alcohol or 24/7 bracelet that can also detect the presence of alcohol, for a combined total of 388 monitoring days in April. There was one no-show to download data. We dealt with that violation also. Overall SCRAM compliance is 99.8%. So compliance with the program, either the breath test twice a day or SCRAM bracelet, is still close to 100%. Work release admitted 62 individuals. Work release clients donated 1,253 hours of community service, and work release admitted 67 individuals in March. House arrest admitted 70 individuals. Excuse me, that's a typo. That should be April. House arrest admitted 70 individuals during the month of April, and those individuals contributed 243 hours of community service. Reentry Assistance Program, or RAP, 21 individuals were admitted to RAP during the month of April. Corrections programs inside the facility, 54 individuals were admitted to corrections programs inside the jail. Practice and official computer-based GED testing began under the new GED model. We're very excited to have that finally up and running. Several individuals passed official intermediate test and are progressing towards successful completion of the requirements to attain their GED. And again, just a reminder, the problems all over the country with this new model, we're finally up and running and getting up to speed, so we're excited about that. Pretrial services, 37 individuals were referred for priority prosecution, 179 bed days were saved, 201 individuals were placed on pretrial release, 588 individuals were managed on pretrial with an 89% compliance rate. Closure number 3, compliance, ACA, NCCHC, and PREA. NCCHC audit is this month, and we're reviewing the contract for our PREA audit, which we hope to have done late summer or early fall. Calling your attention to closure number 4, personnel. Correctional Officer Frank Fellner was promoted to Correctional Officer 2 during the month, and Pete Gorn retired after 25 years of service, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Closure number 6, admissions. Population, we had 1,313 intakes for the month of April, 1,356 releases for the month of April. Our ADP, or average daily population, was 994. U.S. Marshal populations increased, ICE population decreased slightly, felony pretrial population increased, misdemeanor pretrial population increased, female population increased, and we now have 3 female housing units open. It's a little bit early for us to have 3 female housing units open, but as I've spoken to you in the past, this is the march of the day. So we continue to see that population rise over time. Enclosure for medical, it's number 7 at 962 intake screenings. Health and physicals, or H&Ps, are 433 for the month. Discharge referrals, 298. Mental health, initial psych assessments, 53. Initial mental health assessments, 179. Mental health infirmary placements, 48. Referrals to community-based mental health services, outpatient psych, med management, 8. Mental health and co-occurring disorder treatment programs, 190. Mental health therapy, 48. Long-term psych, 4. Usually, that number is usually 0 or 1. I just called your attention, that number's jumped. Mental health numbers, our CWA numbers, our COWS numbers, all of those are up last month, and they were up early too. CWA, alcohol withdrawal, COWS, opiate withdrawal, mental health, all of those numbers were up for us in April, and as I said, they were up early in the month too, and sustained themselves. Please note that I did add the mental health acuity pyramid on after the bar graphs that I've been providing in previous reports, so you can see that breakdown on the subsequent pages in terms of what we're dealing with in terms of psychosis and bipolar and depression and anxiety and adjustment disorder.
Can we put that pyramid just for a short period here up on the screen so Dr. Foxhall can just go through to... Yeah. You know, I'm just so impressed with this particular graphic because we have asked for tracking and what are we really looking at, and this is such a simple but important way of explaining it. So can you just kind of go through each level?
Sure. I'm going to have my expert mental health director come and speak to this chart.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ann Sales, Department of Corrections.
Just a minute, please. Commissioner Kraft.
This graph is somewhat misleading, the way it is formed and what it says. We need to explain to people that not everybody, if you read the average population, 994, and total mental health diagnosis, 957, somebody who is not aware of what we're doing may think that everybody in there has mental health problems. So I would like to see some sort of explanation for these numbers so that somebody looking at it doesn't say, oh my God, everybody in Omaha's crazy. No? Okay?
Understood.
Yeah, and so please explain it with that in mind. Thank you.
Okay. So for every individual that currently is in Douglas County Corrections that is receiving mental health psychiatric treatment at this time, we average it out that each individual that has come in has 1.7 diagnoses per person, which averages to be about 500 to 555 individuals that we currently have housed that are receiving psychiatric treatment. Now, as far as that relates to the pyramid, 15.78 of that percentage of individuals that are diagnosed with a psychiatric disorder have a psychotic disorder, that high acuity of needing psychiatric treatment and typically also needing to be removed from our facility and placed in a long-term psychiatric treatment facility. 19.23% are diagnosed with a bipolar disorder. So there can also be individuals that have a co-occurring diagnosed disorder that might have a psychotic disorder and a bipolar disorder. They could be rule-outs and they can actually be confirmed diagnoses. Depression and PTSD constitute 34% of that diagnostic of all the diagnoses, and 28.3% of anxiety and ADHD. The smallest percentage is that adjustment disorder, because most of the individuals that are adjusting to the environment don't necessarily receive contact with our treatment providers to have a diagnosis. And most of the individuals that are struggling the most, that are in need of psychiatric medications, are actually the ones that are being diagnosed and being seen.
Thank you. And again, I think that just from us constantly talking and asking about tracking what we really have in our jail, you've done just a really great job, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, I want to ask, thanks, Sam. I want to ask, and I call Ann with an E because my wife has an E, but anyway, I wanted to ask you something, if I might, Ann. We've been hearing quite a bit, at least I have, and I've been reading a lot about trauma of all sorts causing long-term problems. And it could lead to, well, starts off with children overacting in school and being pretty uncontrollable and distracted, lots of things going on. And I'm concerned about it because I think this may be really the root of a lot of mental illness. And I don't usually do this, but I was a little shocked when Commissioner Kraft used the word crazy because that's kind of what we do at I guess in slang, but it bothers me because it's really mental illness, and I know that's what you meant. People who are suffering from mental illness, do you have any evidence or have you had any conversations with people about the effects of trauma on mental health?
I don't particularly have any research on that, but in being a practicing therapist, there is a connection for certain individuals on how, over a long period of time, unaddressed trauma and traumatic events that have occurred and abuse that have occurred early in life that haven't been addressed or didn't have access to appropriate levels of care can affect someone over time, because every time you have a new traumatic event, if you've never learned how to cope with those initial traumatic events, it re-traumatizes you back to that initial trauma. So there is, some evidence to that. I don't particularly have any research except for my experience with individuals.
The reason I bring it up is, of course, first of all, I think it's my uneducated opinion that from what I've read and heard from people that it really contributes to a person's difficulties. And I wonder whether in any of the screening that you do, if after you could look into it and see whether it's worth it to talk to them about any childhood events where they witnessed domestic violence or were in a neighborhood where there was a lot of violence or shooting and activity that was difficult to live with. Tough neighborhood, tough environment, lots of turmoil in the family. I really wonder whether that doesn't contribute a lot to it. So I just suggest that too, and I appreciate your openness.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Morgan?
I just wanted to say to Mark Foxhall, I personally, and I think the rest of the board, really appreciate the professionalism that you show and your staff and the work that you're doing in difficult circumstances, and I know it's been a bit unusual for the last few years at the correction facility, and just want to thank you for your dedication and public service.
Thank you. Folks should be proud of the staff that we have there. We're doing a tough job, and I've mentioned that before, but the conditions under which our staff work in is very, very difficult. So I tip my hat to the staff and the folks that are working those housing units, doing escorts at intake, working up in escort and mental health providers, medical providers. It takes a good core group to run a good operation at the Department of Corrections.
It sure seems that we're in a much different time.
Yes.
Than some years ago.
Yes. In fact, the last 5 years has been dramatically different than the 10 preceding it. So, but we have to adapt and deal with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rogers?
Mark, I'm going to make sure on this pyramid, the top piece, which is the 15 that says psychosis, it was said that they're taken outside of the facility to be treated, right? Is that what I heard?
Not all of them are taken outside of the facility to be treated. The goal for them is to receive longer-term treatment if they are not stable. That's only if they're not stable.
I know, but I'm just define to me your definition of what stable means, because I just want to make sure. So the 940, just from here, the population 944 on the diagnoses could be multiple per people. So half of the institution has it, and then the assumption is based on this, we're treating them there unless they're not stable, and that's what I'm trying to get. What's the point that even we can't keep them in there?
Psychiatrically stable means we're able to appropriately medicate them so that they're not going to be a danger to themselves or to others, or decompensate to the point that we're concerned that they're not going to be able to rehabilitate. Because someone who has a psychotic disorder, if you're not treated or are not receiving the necessary treatment in the therapeutic environment that you need, you can remain with some of those debilitations that you're currently dealing with. You can maintain those rather than being rehabilitated with proper treatment. So we have a duty to make sure that those individuals do not decompensate considerably to the point that they may not be able to be rehabilitated.
So I always had this view of us as like the last stop. If you couldn't deal with them, where would they go here?
Well, since we're not actually a psychiatric treatment facility, so what I do with those individuals...
Well, let me frame it up because, supposedly somebody's at a treatment place. They can't deal with them. So they send them here. And so if we can't deal with them, where do they go?
In cases that has happened, where we have had individuals come from other hospitals and end up in our facility, then the regional center. They're then taken. Those are those 4 people that went last month. The regional center takes them and treats them, and then returns them to us, and then they fulfill whatever time they still need to serve, and then they're referred out for longer-term outpatient treatment.
So is it fair to say and I'm just trying to look at this scale, so say that person was in the top 15% here, and I don't know if this is a correlation, that's why I'm asking why. So this person has an episode, they go out. Do they, by this diagram laid out, do they like move down a tier by having the psychosis treated? Do they move into one of these other areas now?
Their diagnosis isn't going to change.
But
just their stabilization may change.
Okay, this is a deeper question than we answer now, but I'll wait and see how it progresses on what comes out, but it's, okay, I'll wait. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Duda?
Thank you.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
In terms of those folks who go to the regional center, that's after a waiting period, and if there's beds available. So it's not contemporaneous to the problem. And works with the regional center, we get on the list and then we wait. And sometimes that waits a long time.
Yeah, so that was well, since you opened up, that was kind of a point. So they went back there. What has changed from when they got treated to where they come back to this environment and it doesn't cause a reoccurrence or something to that degree? I mean, I'm assuming they're being medicated to some degree, but I mean, what causes it from not happening again? It's almost like you got a frequent flyer coming into jail, and then you got a frequent flyer coming in and out of the jail to this region center. That's how I kind of see it. Is that not so? Is that possible, or what? I just feel like it's these people flying back and forth to certain areas, and it's just no point.
It is complicated because they'll they'll bounce from place to place to place. They go out to the regional center, come back, maybe go out, release, and go to a community provider in the community, get arrested again, come back, and it's about maintaining their medication and other support services on the outside. And some people release and they don't have any support. They release into the community without any kind of support, and they get off their meds, they run afoul of the law, and they come back to us, or they release to the community, they get off their meds, they engage in other drug-seeking activity, so they're off their meds, they're using some other illicit drugs, so they've got co-occurring disorder coming back in, so you have to start all over again, and that process just keeps, and that's what the frequent flyers that you speak of, that's what we see. Case managed services in the community is huge, huge, to try to prevent recidivism.
The last piece, so somebody gets to that stage, they're on the waiting list to get in, they're under some type of restraint then until they can get in, I'm assuming?
Not necessarily, just depends.
Okay.
They could for a brief period of time when they're episodic, but it just depends. Every individual is different, or sometimes, and Ann, you might want to speak to this because she's working with those folks every day. When the top two, those top two components of the pyramid give us our biggest challenge in behavior management.
I can speak to the problem that we have when placing these individuals back in outpatient services in the community is we don't necessarily get timely appointments for our individuals that can't sustain a long period of time without a wraparound service. So if I don't have my own personal contacts to use to do that, it's very difficult. It's very difficult for our discharge planner to make those contacts. We're working on that because 30-day out appointments or 60-day out appointments or 90-day out appointments don't really work very well for that frequent flyer population, especially if they only have a week or a couple weeks worth of medications, and we need them to consistently take their medication so they don't go back to the street drugs or whatever it is that they normally would do, because the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, so you're going to go back to what you know is easiest unless we set something up that they can access immediately. So I find it challenging with the wraparound services, trying to get more emergency community support workers connected with our people before they leave. You know, housing is a big issue, where they're going to be, having a phone number. So there's a lot of pieces that play into that, and I don't have an answer for that today. But it's something that I'm definitely working on with the community.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Quick question, and this is probably more for you. In our pyramid here with the PTSD, I generally associate that with returning veterans.
Yes.
But Commissioner Boyle was talking about the impact of people experiencing trauma. Is this PTSD that we list, the 69 people, are these generally veterans, or do we use the term more generically for anybody?
It's a combination. I do know that it does include some veterans.
Okay, but not exclusively.
Not exclusively.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kraft?
Yes, and I'd like to thank Commissioner Boyle for pointing out my insensitivity. I don't use that word in my own vernacular when I'm speaking about mental health. I was putting myself into the coffee crowd that I hang with and what they would say if they saw these numbers. A couple quick questions. Addressing the trauma aspect. I was at a seminar put on by people supporting Ted E. Bear Hallow, which deals with people who've suffered a death in their family, usually youth. And they talk about how these young people are more prone, because of the trauma of experiencing that, to end up in the incarceration system. Do we have any numbers tracking those?
We do not at this
Okay.
time.
I don't know that we need to, but I was just curious. Our street drugs, you mentioned people going back to the street drugs many times because of the lag time in getting them into treatment. Are street drugs more easily accessible? Are they less expensive than the prescriptions? Are they more effective in the person's mind?
That's a complicated question.
I knew it would be.
Yes, the last part, I would say that would be based upon the individual. Yes, some individuals may say that they're more effective for them in their mind. Longer term, it's doing more damage, though we know that as the reality. Now, to answer the first two, yes, they are more accessible, and they can be cheaper, absolutely.
Okay. And this is for Dr. Foxall, this last one. At what point do you expect the 24/7 sobriety program to be self-sufficient?
I would like to see self-sufficiency perhaps by the end of the year, but that's if we have to make some modifications to the programs to allow more offenses to come in. And we're working with the different providers in the community, or not providers in the community, excuse me, criminal justice entities in the community to make that happen. So I would think before the end of the year.
Good. I appreciate that. I realize that we're saving money,
Bed
big
days.
money,
Yes.
but that doesn't go into the self-sufficiency, and it really should, in a sense, because we are saving that money from not having people incarcerated
Yes.
and out there staying sober.
Yes.
So that's a great program. I thank you. I'm pleased you're going to be at the national seminar presenting.
Yeah. I'm confident that we'll get there. It's just a matter of, it's a new program. It's like anything else. You just have to build up confidence in the people that are going to use the programs or assign people to the programs, and I think that's happening. And we're going to get together soon. In fact, we had a meeting scheduled, got canceled. We're going to have a meeting in the next few weeks to get back together with the decision makers, the subcommittee that we have, to decide what offenses next we'd like to move into 24/7. So I will continue, which is why it's on my monthly report, so I can continue to update you.
What are some of the examples that you could put into the 24/7?
Oh, the theft cases. Oh my gosh, right now we're primarily DUIs. I would think theft cases and other types of violations and misdemeanor violations that we have. Maybe some violations, VOPs, violation of probation cases might come through. People that would otherwise sit in our place, perhaps with, because a lot of crimes, people engage in criminal activity when they're drunk and or high. So if we can interdict that behavior, then hopefully we can interdict the next crime from happening. So while that person's under some type of supervision of the court or out on pretrial release, we'd add more people to that program to better monitor their behavior. And I know if we have more accountability in the release of our pretrial detainees, then we can manage that behavior better while they're out in the community. And that's what our goal is. But again, just a matter of building confidence in what is just a program that's just a few months old.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle?
Excuse me. Yes, I think I might add a little different perspective, maybe at least my perspective, to what could make this 24/7 program really take off. And I think it's probably our involvement with the judges. I think they need to feel comfortable that this is something that makes a lot of sense, and it really does. Simply put, Dr. Foxall nailed it when he said that, you know, a lot of people do stupid things under the influence of drugs and alcohol, and all the way from domestic violence to robbing gas stations and dumb things that really hurt people and hurt themselves. And this 24/7, of course, is people being ordered to come in to our facility at 18th and Leavenworth, and Jackson, rather, 17th and Jackson, and breathing into a breathalyzer twice a day.
Yes.
To make sure they're not using alcohol. And when that happens, I mean, it really curtails their behavior. They know they have to do it 2 times a day. It stops that behavior, and frankly, it probably helps them get on the road to recovery. This is a tremendous program that has all the earmarkings of being one of the most direct, common sense approaches to curtailing all sorts of crime. And so, but I do think the judges need to feel comfortable that this is something that makes sense, and I think it does. And so we need to figure out a plan to communicate to that to him and to get their support. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that we had a fellow come in from Heartland Family Services, and Commissioner Borgeson reminded me of the organization that deals with trauma. Not to get back to that, but they deal with it. And I was very impressed by the eloquent presentation made kind of on the spot by the fellow who was here, and would like to see us, I asked him at the end of his presentation what would he do with another $100,000, and he said he would immediately expand the program and get more people into it, which to me is kind of akin to this 24/7. It's a common sense approach to what's happening. So I'd like to see us get connected with them, and maybe there's some things we can all learn and support that kind of approach. The final thing I want to mention is something that Commissioner Rogers and Commissioner Borgeson have been working on diligently, and it's subjects that Commissioner Morgan and I have talked about frequently, and that is the involvement of hospitals. They have a tax-exempt status, which I understand. I don't know that I support it totally, but anyway, I understand it. And what I'd like to see is some commitment, a real commitment from hospitals in our community to open up mental health clinics. Some of our hospitals are just not responsive. We need to make them accountable. And somehow we need to communicate that we support their efforts, but that we're going to get tough. And there are some communities, even some states, most notably Maine, that has talked about taxing nonprofit facilities. So I think we need to get real about what services they are really providing that qualifies them to avoid paying taxes. And I think one of the things we do is we say, you need to participate in this crisis that's at our doorstep. So those are the things I want to contribute to this conversation. I think there's some hope that we'll get this done. So I commend Commissioner Rogers and Commissioner Borgeson for plowing into this, because it's a tough territory. And I'll echo what Commissioner Morgan said. I spent a couple of hours with Dr. Foxall yesterday. Senator Heath Mello came to the correction facility, and I won't intend to interpret what he saw, but I think he was I know he was impressed, because he told me afterwards, with the skills, the professionalism of Dr. Foxall and his staff, the way they deliver services to our community. And it's kind of odd, because it's really based in respect, in a crazy sense. The inmates are, first off, respected by the people who are in charge of their incarceration. And that's kind of a good start. And also, it sets the tone for how people are treated in the facility, with an eye toward, while there's very violent people there, still trying to find that ounce of goodness in some of the really tough characters. But in the other ones, really bringing out the goodness so they can make a change, hopefully. So you are really doing a terrific job. I'm very proud to be associated with you and the work that you do. But you left a big impression on Senator Mello yesterday. Very, very positive. But you did make me stand out in the cold to greet him, which
I sent you some relief.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will say, on the heels of that, in terms of mental health, education, treatment, therapy, they do work, for some. And not everything works for everybody, but it does work. It's capacity, folks. It's capacity. And it's our responsibility to provide that capacity. So, and something that Ann said that I mentioned to you in a meeting that we had last week, it's about relationships too. And Ann stated it very eloquently. The better she is able to establish those relationships in the community, Ann's relationships with providers in the community, the better opportunities our releasing inmates have. And that's huge. That's huge. It's about relationships, folks. Relationships and capacity. If we could further expand that, I think we'd be doing pretty good. But we're getting there. And we know the direction that we need to go, but just need to get more people on board. We need to build more capacity for the things that we know that work.
Right.
But with capacity comes other things. And that's another meeting. So.
Well, Commissioner Rogers?
Yeah, thank you, Madam. Mark, I need to ask you, based on discussion for some couple of data points next month, if you can add it to it. Do you all keep income ranges of people that come in?
We do not.
Okay. Do we have, you got addresses though?
We have addresses. You know
Okay.
how good they are sometimes.
Exactly.
And I guess we would have to play with, I guess, can you ask Sham Law to GIS the inmates at some time
Sure.
to like lay out, kind of like you did with probation when you were at Project Impact Piece?
Oh, yeah.
Because that will at least give us some correlation. I guess what I'm trying to get at is,
You want to map?
and I know she's got
You want to map the
yeah,
people coming in?
yeah.
I can do that.
And map them, and he can break them down by our county districts. Because my sense is that, and I'm trying to see if there's a tie between some meetings we've been having about the medical home of the people when they leave, and depending on their income or where they may be at, there may be a way to try to make a stronger connection to see if there's some affiliation there.
Are you talking about mapping all 1,500 we have coming in the door?
I think we can talk about what it is, but I don't know if you start with who's getting released, but still, you know, they say that the reentry plan is based day one that the person comes in. And so at some point in time, I don't know if that, you know, it's once a month or something, to some degree we get the report about what the general idea of the location of the population is to give us some point in time.
That shouldn't be a problem. I think we can get a dump into the mapping software and produce a report for you.
Okay.
It may take a little while to write. Again, you're dealing with the mainframe and COBOL. So, but I think we can do that and get that into the GIS software.
Yeah, because I think that visual, I think, will give us an idea how to go about, hopefully a beginning point to try to address some of this when they leave.
Sure.
So I want to like to see that visual.
I think that's a good. I think it's a good idea. And I'd go back around to the conversation we had last week in our committee meeting about our partnership with the university to assist us in efforts like this. The more I talk, the more data you want, and I know what you need, but it's just a matter of getting some help to do the analytics, and that's a huge part of what I was talking about last week.
Well, and my thought is, even though you don't have incomes, this is, the health department has a set of information from the CHIP, and they have it broken down, and if this pans out, at least they can get an idea, if this inmate location pans out, my gut tells me, and if it is, if it's proven wrong, that's great, but if most of the people outlay in an area that has like no insurance coverage, no health care coverage to some degree, to me it proves the point of this emphasis that when I was at a conference they were saying your jail needs to be an extension of the health care and the public health system, because the people that are there, if they're not treated there, bring it back and forth. And if this pans out like it is, I think this just proves the case of the healthcare service that we have being a connected piece. And if you don't get an idea of some type of insurance on the outside, you just perpetuate this cycle that you all are seeing, because you're never going to be able to get them caught up medication-wise if they don't have any access to healthcare.
I think it's a great idea. It's just a matter of having the resources to capture that data and then plot it. And I think we have the beginnings of that discussion going with the university.
Just a couple of things. The trauma, I know our staff at the JAC have gone through the trauma training, and I think some at the youth center.
They took $2,000 of the community-based aid money and provided the training to everybody in the county that deals with kids and offered it to community-based organizations that deal with juveniles and youth.
Okay. So it's becoming more of a topic that
Good.
people are paying attention, so you're right on that we need to be on top of it as well. The zip code that Commissioner Rogers was talking about, it's similar to what we did for our general assistant clientele. And then I think what would be very interesting with all of that is cross-referencing as we do with our community mental health center clients as to how many of them are the same that enter our jail. And then I think we may find that their medical home happens to be our general assistance center as well. So I think it's important, and some of the literature I've been reading about zip code specific areas that you center your attention on. So if you do these overlaps of all these mappings that you have, and you find that, you know, we know zip code 68111 is a huge zip code for a lot of issues within our county, and so if we were to overlay that and then place an emphasis on that zip code area and see what we can do to make change within that zip code, other things will follow. So the mapping of it is important so that we can at least see where everything lies. But I think it's a good initiative to try to move forward with. So I too want to say, you know, I've been here not as long as Commissioner Duda, but we've been here the longest, and we have seen changes in our correctional facility, not only the staffing and the leadership of it, but the clientele that we have within our facility is a lot different than what we've had way back when. I think the staff has done a tremendous job of adapting to those issues. You know, we rarely heard back then about assaults on officers, and we hear them all too frequently now.
Yes.
So what they're putting up with and what they're dealing with, I commend you for keeping everybody on track over there. And we do have good staff.
Yes.
And we do need to continue to support you as we have in the past. And I have no doubt we will, but it's hard, very hard.
It's a very difficult job. Well, people understand how many moving parts there are to corrections, or how complicated the profession it is, and certainly many in the community don't understand what those housing unit officers and escort officers and other custody staff and support staff too deal with on a daily basis. And it's just it's remarkable the changes that we've seen in the last 5 years. Just remarkable.
Well, you're doing a good job. Keep it up.
Thank you.
No other lights on for commissioners?
There is one more thing. Just put a date saver in, and I'm sorry, I just have to confirm, make sure that we've got the confirmation on the date for a memorial service to honor some of our staff that passed in the last few years. 21st, 1 o'clock? Okay. March 21st, excuse me, May 21st. That would be difficult to do. May 21st, 1 o'clock. Our training rooms A, B, and C, we're going to have a memorial ceremony for several of our staff who passed away while they were still employed with the county. And we're going to dedicate a plaque to them, and we're going to have several honor guards, to include our own, participate in this ceremony. So formal invitations are coming out today, but I wanted to mention that at the service, or excuse me, at the board meeting today, so you could put it in as a date saver.
Okay.
But again, more formal information should be forthcoming today.
And you
Thank
said
you.
March 21st,
May.
May 21st at what time?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Please vote.
Madam Chair, before we do this, Dr. Foxall, we have a gentleman in the audience, I think, who had maybe something to do with a presentation, or am I, or is that coming later?
It's coming.
Coming later?
It's coming.
Okay, sorry.
Here.
Excuse me for
No.
It's
interrupting.
found on a lot of things.
Okay.
So we'll vote.
Yeah.
Vote, I'm sorry to
No, that's
interrupt
fine.
you.
That's fine.
Thank you.
We'll,
Commissioner
actually,
Rogers, Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
Motion passes.
we'll actually move to that presentation that Commissioner Boyle is referring to once we go into the agenda for the Douglas County Board of Commissioners. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Boyle,
Here.
Commissioner Kavanaugh, Commissioner Duda, Commissioner Kraft, Commissioner Morgan, Commissioner Rogers. Madam Chair.
Here, we will just move to the recognition and proclamations. We have one recognition of a county employee, Mr. Pedro Gorin, retiring from the Douglas County Department of Corrections after 25 years of service. And John, why don't you read that? Have Mark or you read that? And did you bring anybody with you?
Yeah, she wants to stay back there.
Okay.
Sergeant Gorin? Board of County Commissioners, Douglas County, Nebraska. Resolved, whereas Douglas County, Nebraska recognizes that its employees are the county's most important asset and resource for providing quality service to the citizens of Douglas County, whereas the county wishes to recognize Mr. Pedro J. Gorn of Douglas County Corrections on his retirement and his dedicated service of 25 years to Douglas County, Nebraska. Now, therefore, be it resolved by this Board of County Commissioners, Douglas County, Nebraska, that the county recognizes Mr. Pedro J. Gorn for his dedicated service to the citizens of Douglas County and thankfully presents this resolution as testimony thereof, dated this 12th day of May, 2015. Sergeant Gorn, congratulations and happy retirement, sir.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Second.
Please vote.
I don't do this too often. First off, I'd like to thank the county board for hiring me. It's been a great job. It's afforded me a great lifestyle. Also, I'd like to thank Mr. Hubbard and Warren Foxall for allowing me to come back to work. I don't know if you're aware, at the time, I had a heart attack. I'm just grateful that I was at work, and my co-worker insisted that I go to the hospital. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have went. I'm just, like I said, I'm just glad that they allowed me to come back to work and finish the way that I wanted to finish. So I just want to extend my gratitude also as far as to my coworkers for so many years of working there with them. I'm going to miss them all, as well as a good friend of mine that was a mentor there when I first started, Robbie Bryant, Sergeant Louis Sanchez, and many other people that I worked with there that are still there. You know, it's been a long ride, but it was a great ride. Like I said, it was a great place to work, you know, so that's all I have to say, but thank you.
Well, thank you for your service.
Motion passes.
You know, we're very happy that you told us that story and happy that you are here with us. And you are a shining example of the great staff that we have.
Right.
And so now is time for you to go and enjoy your retirement, enjoy good times with your family and your friends. And make sure you do that honey-do list. That's going to be waiting for you.
Yeah, she already has it already, so I've been working on that list already, so, but, yes, but thank you, though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Come on by so we can shake your hand. I always kind of hold my breath when an employee comes up to the podium to speak. You never know. Thanks a lot. Congratulations.
With that, we will move back to the beginning of the agenda. Item 1A, approval of the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held Tuesday, May 5th, 2015. And item B, approval of claims submitted for payment processor Tuesday, May 12th, 2015.
Approval of items A and B.
Any questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes.
The consent agenda has items A through L, and we have a couple that I know are going to be discussed, but the first one, item A, the county attorney does have and wishes to submit a conflict of interest document because of Don Klein's wife working for the organization. So how do you submit that?
Yes, Commissioner. We have filed a disclosure statement with the Nebraska Accountability and Disclosure Commission. Any type of contract that would be a potential conflict of interest for an official. In this case, it's Douglas County Attorney Donald Klein. His wife is listed on the contract with CHI Health, Home Health. And so we have filed this disclosure statement. We would also like to file one with the clerk's office, and we have copies to provide all of you to explain the disclosure. If there's any questions.
All right. Any questions, Commissioner Boyle, or is that for after this one?
That's about some other items.
Okay.
Are we ready to take action on this item? I mean, understanding they have a conflict, we're still ready to move forward and take action. Thank you.
Okay. So you can submit that, and then that one's taken care of. And then are there other items, Commissioner Boyle, you'd like?
I had I guess a question about D and C, if I could, and possibly E. I had a question about some of the acronyms that were used. I wasn't really sure what that was all about.
Okay. And then Commissioner Kavanaugh, yours were...
Yes, I had, at the last meeting, asked that this item be laid over so that we could review the contract, which is, I think, necessary in all cases, certainly in important contracts like this. And at the behest of Commissioner Boyle, the hospital folks, Mr. Torville, and our staff met with the Allegiant CHI folks, and Commissioner Morgan and I spent some time with them going over this contract last Friday. And in some depth, we spent quite a while going over the provisions of this contract to our satisfaction, I believe. I know that Commissioner Boyle had reviewed the contract as well and was unable to join us on Friday. And so my question is, do we need additional time for you to be satisfied that the conditions of the contract and the responsibilities that we are assuming as the county are met?
I appreciate your asking. The answer is no. I did get some excellent answers that I finally found in my email that Patrick Bloomingdale was kind enough to send to me, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, and I finally got them and read them, which they did answer my questions, and I appreciate your asking. I owe an apology to everyone who was assembled because I have the meeting down for the 21st, and I'll be there on the 21st on Friday. So I apologize to everyone I stood up, but I appreciate your looking into this, and I accept the answers that I received. Thank you for asking, Commissioner Kavanaugh.
No, thank you, because this goes to kind of a more generic issue relative to the contracts and consent calendar requests, because there are other items on this consent calendar today that I've asked to be informed on, because I think it's just best policies that we do seek information on important decisions, particularly relative to long-term commitments like contracts, like long-term appointments of personnel. And so with the Allegiant contract, fully vetted, I think, and certainly by this board, by a number of us looked at and approved, I would say that we probably should look at instituting a similar process to ensure transparency for the public to be able to be informed of issues and obligations facing the county and that we are prepared to assume, and also to give them notice of important upcoming actions like appointments to public boards, which some of them have long terms of service, rather than just kind of rubber stamping everything that comes up. I was struck by the depth of knowledge that our hospital staff displayed relative to the contract with Allegiant to provide hospice services. It also informs our budget discussions because there are budgetary impacts of a lot of these contracts, and we are engaged in a tight budget process right now. And it's important, I think, that we strategically plan our obligations going forward so that if we enter into an agreement today, we know that its impacts next year and the year after and the year after that, we're aware of their impacts on our budget process, because that impacts on our tax policy. And I think that we need to look carefully at each obligation that we assume to make sure that it is factored in going forward and doesn't surprise us in a year or two with some economic impact that we could have anticipated had we looked at it. It also will give the public an opportunity to observe and comment about our policy going forward, which is an important thing that we should consider in all contracts, multi-year appointments, and interlocal government agreements. So with that, I would say that we're probably in a position to act on this particular item. I do have reservations on items that I've shared with the commissioners, B and E and H on the consent agenda, and would ask that they be laid over for more in-depth consideration and public discussion.
We will, just for now, remove those from the consent agenda motion. So I would need a motion to approve the consent agenda items A, F, G, I, J, K, and L.
So moved. Second.
Any other questions or comments? Please vote.
Commissioner Duda?
Yeah.
Motion passes.
Next is, we'll take each one of these. Item B, resolution to approve amended local workforce development area interlocal agreement. Commissioner Rogers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a agreement that the board approved late last year, and the only change to it is some acronyms due to federal workforce change in law. The acronyms change was changed from WIA to WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. The agreement will probably come to the board again later this year or early next year, because the request for change that I'm sending is regards to federal law change. And so we had to make acronyms and everything consistent with federal law. I'd like to respond to the point of public comment. This contract in particular has had 4 public hearings, because one has had a public hearing at the city. It had one here. It has a chance now. It had a chance at the Washington County Board meeting and also the Sarpy County Board meeting. So we're the last entity to approve it. There's no money to it, and it's pretty routine.
Okay.
And I move for approval.
Second.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
I appreciate the time that Commissioner Rogers has taken with me to go over the content of this interlocal government agreement and give me the background on its history and purpose. I actually worked for this program back in the early 70s, I guess, in a previous iteration. And so I'm familiar generally with its intent, and it's a good one. Put people who need work to work. That's good for us, and it's good for the economy, and it's also good in that my understanding, Commissioner Rogers, it doesn't involve any expenditure of county funds. Is that correct?
That is correct.
It does call for the appointment of a board of various compositions, including members of this board. Is that right?
That is correct.
And how actually is that board appointed?
That board is appointed through this interlocal agreement and the agreement that was signed in '98 between the entities by the mayor. And each county board gets 1 rep, and and it has to have a 51% business majority.
So the mayor makes the appointments. Is that?
That is
Am I understanding
correct.
that correctly? And one of those members is a county commissioner. Is that correct?
From each of the 3 counties.
Right. Do we currently have a commissioner member on this board?
Yes,
And who's that?
myself.
Okay. And how long have you served on this board?
I've served on the board since 2005, but not as the county board member rep. The recent change to the law, when we negotiated, I asked that a county board rep be included from each of the 3 counties, and since last year, I've officially served as a county board rep. My service the past years has been as a separate appointed member by the mayor of Omaha.
Generally speaking, what's the annual budget of this entity?
Annual budget of the entity appropriated from the U.S. Department of Labor funds that come down through WIA is somewhere approximately around $1.2 million appropriated, and then there's carryover, and those aren't specific figures, but approximately total what's in the pot right now include carryover funds. They may be somewhere between 1.2 to 1.7 that's allocated.
And how are those monies used?
Those monies are used to provide training opportunities to individuals that fit the WIA law requirements in 3 counties. Individuals may use funds to get training, or they may use funds to be employed on the job training.
And say in the last calendar year, how many individuals received this training?
That number I don't have with me accurately.
An approximate number, maybe?
I'm scared to say that number because it may be off.
Okay.
But those areas, based on the plan, each area has a plan. And our area has a plan. The plan has to identify what your specific training needs are. Our areas of priority for this area are transportation and logistics, healthcare, finance, and insurance. The clientele that's mostly served through this county area is heavily underemployed and unemployed individuals, majority of them at a level of poverty and have significant barriers such as probation or some criminal record on them to an extent. Not all of them, but a portion of them.
Do we receive regular or annual reports on the progress of this program?
Yes, in the original agreement that was signed, the board gets a copy of the budget, and they have a certain amount of days to look at that budget, and any tweaks to that budget and programming the board gets, and they have a certain amount of time to respond. That was included in the redoing of the contract last year.
And when does that happen?
That happens whenever the budget is formed at the periods of, it should be happening sometime here between June and October. The new budget for the upcoming year.
And your term of service on this board, how long is that going forward?
3-year periods. I have to look at the term of the bylaws, but they're in 3-year stints.
So you have a couple of years to go on your term?
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is the type of inquiry that I think is important to have on agreements that we enter into, whether they're legal contracts, as in the Allegiant CHI matter, or interlocal agreements as we have here, or as we discovered over a period of, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks with the MAPA interlocal government agreement recently. And I appreciate, again, Commissioner Rogers taking the time to give me some background and update on this, because it is important, I think, that the public understand what we do, what it costs, and how it impacts on people. I think anyone watching this meeting will have a good idea on this program of what it is, what it costs, and what it tries to do to help put people to work. And with that, I would say that I would not have an objection to proceeding with this matter today on the consent agenda.
There is a motion and a second to approve item B. Any other discussion? Please vote.
Motion passes.
Next is item C, Mr. Eric Carlson, purchasing agent, bid acceptances for National Electric to provide outdoor warning siren maintenance and repair for the Douglas County Emergency Management Agency, and then the GSA Inc. to provide HEPA vacuums for the Douglas County Health Department. Commissioner Boyle, did you want the emergency management?
Well, I think the county clerk has something to say about this.
Madam Chair, that's been approved.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we held that one over.
Well, I thought we did too, but I just had some questions I want to ask about the acronyms.
Even though we've approved it, go ahead and ask.
Well, I mean, I don't mean to... Okay, great. I need all the translations.
I'm sorry, I thought we pulled that one out.
I did too, actually. Eric Carlson, Douglas County Purchasing. Good morning.
Right, excuse me. And the questions I had, excuse me, took me up on this. COG is in there. That's Council of Government, right? Is that MAPA? There's use of the phrase, and my computer is not...
Are you talking about the siren?
Yeah, yes, I am, excuse me. Item E. Yes. And if my computer will let me pull it up, somewhere in that agreement was that there were phrases that were used, and sorry about this.
No, it's okay.
I know Commissioner Duda's loving this, that I can't get my computer to...
Can I help?
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, let me just wing it. I made a couple of notes. Maybe you'll hear it as it opened. And I don't mean to belabor the point, but they talked about IPAWS, I-P-A-W-S, open. Let's see.
Oh, that's for item E.
Well, that's what I thought we were doing.
No, C.
No, I'm sorry.
That's okay, I really can't help you with that
I
one.
wondered why you came down when I see...
You didn't have any questions for C?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll
That's
bring
good.
it up 2 weeks from now.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I'll be ready.
Not really. Thanks.
Let me just get, did we have D? Did you have a question on D?
No, just E. I have a question on the...
E. Did we approve D? Was that included in the?
Yeah.
Was it, I thought you maybe skipped it. What do you
That's
think,
what I
Al?
thought.
Madam Chair, you approved A through L with the exception of B, E, and H.
Right.
Okay,
E is in Edward.
okay. So E is Douglas County agreement with FEMA
Right.
to use integrated public alert and warning systems. Mr. Paul Johnson,
Paul
if
Johnson.
you could come forward to answer a few questions.
The price is right. Come on down. Come on down. Which door do you want to choose?
Paul Johnson, Director of the Douglas County Emergency Management Agency.
Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, sir.
I had some questions, as I said, about the acronyms, and maybe they're in here now, but let's see, Public Alert and Warning Systems, PAWS, integrated, I guess, comes first. Can you explain what this is? I mean, I guess what is it?
Good question. After September 11th, 9/11, part of the report that came out of that was the fact that the public did not have a way of notifying its citizenry on a mass basis. And so FEMA has developed, through Homeland Security, this IPAWS system, Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. What that allows the locals to do is it allows us to send out emergency messages, and we send out those emergency messages over a computer, and through the IPAWS system, you'll get those messages on your cell phone, your weather radios, your TV. It's a pretty robust system. And so FEMA has rolled this out for the nation, and we have to approve the use of that here locally in order to accept that capability.
Okay. Is this similar, excuse my question, it may not be appropriate, but is this similar to what is happening in La Vista? Are they ahead of us on this curve, or is this something that is not the same?
No, they're not. They're using a local private vendor. This is a federal system.
Okay.
And this is cell tower based, so that when the emergency alerts go out, depending on where the notification needs are, the cell towers are activated. The system that they have is what they call an enrollment system, where people enroll your sign up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you, if it's a cell phone, did you say it's a cell phone tower-based system?
Yes.
Okay, what happens, I don't have a landline anymore, what happens if you have a landline? Do you get any warnings?
This is part of this system. You'll have the warning system is integrated, and because it is integrated, it's a very robust system, and so it's a multi-device. In fact, that's really its strength, is the fact that all these devices are utilized.
So what can a citizen of Douglas County expect now that we're going to have this? What will happen? What could happen?
What could happen is this system could be used. You're seeing an element of it now, really, when you get weather alerts on your cell phones, that kind of thing. It's very similar to that. But when we would have the need for an evacuation, orderly movement of the population, that type of thing, this is the tool that would be used.
Would it be, would you see people who live in, say, southwest Omaha receiving an information on their cell phone that a tornado was sighted and heading toward them? Is that what you see this system doing or not?
They would get that now through a system as well that's part of this. It's called WIA. The federal government's full of acronyms. Right. I apologize for that. But it's Wireless Emergency Alerts, which is part of IPAWS. So the Weather Service does have that active now, and so people would get those notifications even now.
Do we have those things automatically? I got one the other day, and I
Yes.
didn't know I had it. So
Yes.
they're automatic?
Yes.
Okay. Pretty cool.
Yes, it's
What other
quite
what
a
other-
change, really.
What other uses, I mean, what do you expect? I mean, do you think, I mean, I got the Amber Alert the other day, too, on my phone. Is that the sort of thing that you would
Yes, sir.
receive? Okay. All right, well, I really appreciate your telling us about this. And is the acronym COG used in here, COG?
Yeah,
someplace?
COG, federal government uses the same acronym for multiple programs. It's FEMA. But this stands for Collaborative Operating Group.
Okay.
So
thought it
we
was
would be a collaborative operating group based on this agreement and signing of this. Then we would be approved as a collaborating operating group, which allows us in Douglas County to utilize this system.
Great. I thought COG was Council of Government, which is MAPA. That's
And
a
it's
little-
also continuity of government. I've seen that. I mean, it's
Okay.
COG is used.
Okay. Well, you've answered my questions very well, and I
you.
appreciate the brevity in the response, and I hope I was as brief asking the questions.
Very good. Intuitive questions. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Nice job.
Any other questions for the item E? Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Mr. Johnson, would there be any cost to Douglas County of entering into this agreement?
No, it's federally funded.
And so what will happen financially if we enter into this agreement? The federal government will give us money or hardware or what?
No, it's really it's a federal system that works. You know, the federal government is the one that's worked out the agreements with the cell towers or with the cell phone companies. They've worked out the agreements with the National Weather Service. We're utilizing those tools based on their federal agreement.
So what will we have to do to utilize those tools?
What we do is that we will have an internet portal that allows us to get into the system. That internet portal is under a state contract right now.
All right. So you anticipate no financial contribution by Douglas County to implement this program?
Only to the extent of using the internet portal,
And what
which
would
is
that
a
be?
state contract.
I'm sorry.
Which is a state contract. And we use that internet portal for a variety of things. We use it for what we call the internal alert system, so that people get notified in key government positions if a community emergency or natural disaster develops.
Is that through Nebraska Interactive, or who's the portal?
This is
manager?
through the Office of the CIO, through the state of Nebraska.
And do we pay an annual fee to use that portal?
Yes, it's approximately $2,000.
I'm sorry?
$2,000.
I see. So that would be the extent of our financial contribution?
Yes,
And we're already making that contribution?
we're already making that contribution.
Through your budget?
Yes, sir.
We're not adding any personnel or any other costs to the county budget?
Not because of this, no.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle?
Another question that occurred to me is that cell phone towers are destroyed in severe storms and so forth. And what is this all about? If we are going to be communicating through cell phone towers and they're damaged by or destroyed, then there is no way for the messages to get out.
Good question.
Is there an answer?
Yes, there is. We have, in Douglas County, it's the multiple means of notification that make us robust and strengthen our communication need here. And part of that, through this agreement, is the use of the weather radio. And the weather radio is the most redundant or most robust use of emergency notifications that's out today. And the fact that people that have weather radios, even though the power would go off, the weather radio has a battery in it. And so ultimately, the weather radio would be used to receive that notification. So it's not just cell phones. It's weather radios, it's news media, it's sirens, it's a combination of things.
Well, if the power goes off and the cell phone towers are down, you could rely on your battery-operated weather radio if you have one.
If you have one. And we strongly encourage people to have weather radios in the Midwest.
Okay, thanks a lot.
No further questions on item E. Was there a motion? Is there a motion to approve item E?
Move for the approval.
Second. Please vote.
Motion passes.
Next is item H, the resolution reappointing Robert Woody, Robert Brune, and Bill Bowers to the Douglas County Planning Commission. And Commissioner Kavanaugh, you had a question or comment on that?
I do. These appointments, I put in the same informational category as contracts, interlocal agreements, things that obligate us going forward, that should have a full and fair public hearing, should be subject to a transparent process of selection, and should not just be automatically rubber stamped year after year after year. The three that we have before us, I have no idea who these individuals are. There are no support documents with the proposed resolution, even to the extent of resumes. I would recommend that we look at a process for appointment that's widely used in government, both local and state in Nebraska, to fill appointments that allows for A, public awareness that the appointment is available and exists, B, public hearing of those who we would like to appoint to these positions, and C, the public discussion of the appointments by this board before final resolution. This always occurs with state appointments to any board, appointees to the executive branch boards would be recommended by the governor to the legislature. They would be set for hearings in front of an appropriate committee of jurisdiction. Those hearings held, the committee would either recommend or not recommend those appointments to the legislature, and normally the legislature wouldn't engage in very much debate at that point, because you've already been through this process of examination and open, public, transparent discussion. So what I would recommend, with no reflection upon these individuals, I'm sure they're fine folks, and I understand that they have served on these boards in the past, is that perhaps going forward, we could have some information on who they are and what they do and why they would like to be appointed to the board, even if they're being reappointed to the board. And maybe we could also work on little more public awareness of the existence of these boards with the residents of Douglas County. We have 500,000 plus people that live in the county, and it would seem to me that a term or two on any county board might be sufficient for any single individual, and then maybe we could bring some new blood in. So what I would ask for simply on these, in order to allow us to begin that process going forward, is that if we could lay them over, provide the commissioners with the background information that I've outlined. We can discuss them informally amongst ourselves between now and the next time that they are laid over to, when they come up again, and move forward at that time. So that would be my, I guess, rationale for removing these for special discussion and consideration. And again, nothing specific to these three individuals. I'm sure they're fine. I have no clue who they are. Even a resume would be, helpful. There must be some formal application process. Some paperwork must be filled out someplace. Our website has very scanty information on even the existence of these boards, makes no explanation of what they do or even who currently serves on them. So we might also revisit the public information that we post on our own website to make it a little more robust, a little more transparent, a little more informative.
I would just ask that we move forward with these appointments and start your process of looking at our own process as we move forward. These appointments, we've been provided information both in January and in April, and this month they're on the agenda, of those that have wanted reappointment. There's still some out there that we need folks on that will be coming forward as well. These individuals, when they first become appointed, there is a resume. And a lot of times with some of those boards, there is a vetting process that is done by the organization itself that brings a recommendation. That's going to be one that comes for the Douglas County Housing Authority. They look at their makeup of their board. They look for if it is a resident, if it's someone that lives in a certain area, and then they vet them and bring them to our board as a recommendation. These individuals, Mr. Robert Woody was appointed in 2012, Bob Brune in 2003, and Bill Bowers in 2013. Our process that we currently have has been that those in those positions whose terms are up, we ask if they want to be reappointed. If they want to be reappointed, then those are just brought forward to the board. If we're going to change that, then we need to talk about what change in process that we are going to have on that. But for these individuals, again, they've served. It's a non-paying position. And again, we have heard as you said, they're good people, nothing bad about their serving. So I would ask just for these individuals that we move forward and talk about a new process from there forward. Commissioner Boyle?
I'll yield.
Hi, Laura McCormick, 714 Valley. Ms. Kristen Lynch is just now leaving, and I do want to comment. I do want to comment about this particular issue, but I did have a question for her.
That's not her.
Oh, okay, it's not her? Okay,
no.
by mistake. But I guess my concern is I regularly attend lots of these meetings, as you know, and I have ample opportunity to ask questions, as does anyone. So I'm a bit confused, Commissioner Kavanaugh, especially in light of the fact that I've asked you many questions, and you're my direct elected official, and you haven't bothered to answer any of them. So I would just politely say that as a member of the public, I have had no problem in trying to discern if I had questions about somebody who was appointed. I go to audit committee meetings and there's discussion about people. The public has a right to participate. I never once have felt as though it was not transparent. And we've spent about 20 minutes talking about this. So what I would really like, though, is maybe you could tell me when you're going to answer some of the questions that I sent you as my elected representative. Will you be doing that?
Thank you, Laura. Commissioner Boyle?
Yes.
We go back to you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think Commissioner Kavanaugh raises a lot of issues that I've raised over the years. And, excuse me, I've talked about just the things he said about bringing new people in, all that sort of thing. And of course, all of us are clinging to our county board seats, so it kind of flies in the face of what we do, you know. But anyway, term limits for everybody else, that's good. Ooh. Anyhow, excuse me, and I'm not a supporter of term limits. But in this case, I think it'd be a good thing to review it. And there is another kind of a real problem that occurs, not often, but particularly on the planning board, where we'll have a vacancy for one person or something. And what'll happen is that there'll be more than one person will be interested in the position. And we need to work out a way that's handled, because in the past, it was a rush to get the name on the agenda. So whoever was on first, it would say appointing Joe Dokes to a 3-year term or something to the planning board, and below that would be appointing James Smith to the same job. Well, Joe Dokes gets the deal, so James Smith never even gets considered. So we need to figure that out. Having said that, I agree with Commissioner Borgeson. These names are on here. They are people who have expressed an interest, and I do know that their resumes were originally presented. So I think in fairness to them, I'd like to see this move forward and then develop a policy in the future. I agree with what you're saying. And as always, being Irish, there's always a story with all of this. Jeez. When I was in the mayor's office, I appointed someone being sensitive to ethnic backgrounds. I appointed a Colombian to the personnel board. And everything was going along really fine. They're hearing all these civil service complaints and people appealing their jobs and very sensitive stuff. And one day, Jim Doyle, the personnel director, walked into my office, and he said, we had a party for so-and-so. And I remember his name, but I'm not saying it. For so-and-so, a very, very heavy Spanish name. And I said, oh, that's really nice. And he looks at me. I said, well, what was the party, his birthday? He said, no, he became a citizen. So I had appointed someone who was not a citizen of the United States, and I don't know what that did. This is the first time I've admitted in public, but it's a great cocktail party story, you know. And the fellow reminds me of it all the time. The point is, too, we need to make sure that the qualifications are being met. And our pool, frankly, is many times restricted only to people who live in the county a lot of times. We have one person on the planning board that has to live in the city, which would be something we'd be interested in. I don't think you represent any county territory, I don't know. So the two of us don't have a lot to say about who these, I mean, we don't have a lot of constituents who would fill these vacancies. There's about 80,000 people, I think, or 85,000 in the unincorporated areas in the county that are not in the city who would be the pool from which a lot of these people are chosen. So anyhow, I like what you said, Commissioner Kavanaugh, but I also respect Commissioner Borgeson. Let's move with this one, and then let's do some things. That's what I'd like. That's what I think is a good compromise, I hope.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
And I agree with that. What I would request, maybe, and we can move ahead, is I haven't actually been provided with the resumes. Right. These folks might have submitted them 3 years ago when they were originally appointed, but if I could be provided with those on an ongoing basis, at least so that until we get the procedures in place that we're discussing here today, it would give me some idea of who they are going forward. And if that could happen, I think we could move on.
And I also think that we can add the description of the committees on that. I'll work with staff on that, but can you make sure he gets the resume?
Yeah, if they go to the governor's website, they'll see, and I believe it comes out quarterly or semi-annually, a comprehensive compendium of executive appointments, and it'll give you some requirements, statutory requirements, geographic requirements, whatever, and a contact person, and I think we make progress.
Right, absolutely. Is there a motion to approve? Oh, Kent, sorry.
Commissioners, Kent Holm, Environmental Services Director. I would just point out that we have information about the Planning Commission, who the current members are, and so on. So you could easily just link to that information on our particular website if that was of interest.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Move for the approval of item 8.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion passes.
Next is citizen comments. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to speak to the Board of Commissioners about an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to presentations. It is the presentation of the recommendation from our County Government Awareness Committee. This has long been coming. This is supposed to be in color. I hope it was last week, but it's red, white, and blue. This logo, let me back up just for refreshing memories. We went through and found that when we developed our County Government Awareness Committee that we did not have an official county seal. And we had like 5 or so of them that we used, but not one that was officially adopted by any county board in the past. So we had a contest, we tweaked it, and it was eventually approved, and it is now behind us on the wall. And there's guidelines and everything that Marcos helped the committee draw up on the use of that and the colors and all of that. And then how we were going to, when people ran out of their existing stationery or business cards, they could order with the new seal. So the County Government Awareness Committee decided that we also needed a new logo. There was one that was never adopted as well. Each department and office kind of used whatever they wanted to use. We have requests. The most recent one was from the Summer Art Festival. So if you can imagine a poster, a flyer talking about that event, and then at the bottom where they have all of the organizations that sponsor or donate or something, they'll have their logos. And so we have currently just used a DC, and it said Douglas County. That was it. And so that would be what a logo would be used for on such flyers as such. So the committee went through a number of ideas, samples. Connie Lehman from the Health Department did a tremendous job of coming up with the ideas and making the changes when they were asked to be made. The first one that we brought to the board, they felt there were too many colors, it was too busy, some stuff on it didn't make sense, we needed to simplify. And so over the course of the last year and a half to 2 years, the committee worked on simplifying it and came up with this one that everyone seemed to think it simplifies. And Claire, thank you. I see you have the colored one on your computer.
Anything I can help with.
Yeah, that's really good, Claire. That's really good, yeah. And so, yeah, there you go. And so this, again, is the logo. We'll do the same thing. If this is approved, we'll bring back and work on the guidelines of how it's to be used and where it's to be used. And again, it's more for those flyers. It's for coffee cups. It's do coffee cups or T-shirts or water bottles. I'm trying to think of what else we've purchased. So it's supposed to be used for that versus the seal that's very busy and very hard to replicate. So with that, I would ask that for a motion to approve the logo, and then we'll bring back the rules and regs. Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes, and it's very nice. I always thought that we had a seal based on the old doorknobs from the Douglas County Courthouse were imprinted. And it said Seal of Douglas County, I believe. Because I have one in my office, and I think, Mike, you might have one, and you might have one. Yeah. But every 100 years or so, it probably doesn't hurt to revisit the issue of the seal. I always thought the logo of Douglas County, or the tagline, was "We work for you." I'm not sure where I heard that, but I'd been told that over time and had seen that represented many other places. But again, I think it's a a nice looking logo, and like the Arts Festival, I've always noticed that it's really hard to read the fact that we are a sponsor on many of these things. They put us like in agate type down at the bottom, and you have to have a magnifying glass to even see that we've sponsored it. So perhaps this will bump up our our sponsorship awareness a little bit, and that'll be a good thing.
Yeah. Commissioner Boyle?
I was only going to say that
A couple things. First is that I think where you see "We work for you" is at all the family events you have. Tom puts this on the cakes.
You've been talking to some of my
siblings. He puts it on everything. No, anyway, it's a good logo. But The seal that we have, the doorknobs, I think what they say is Douglas County Commissioners, which is kind of weird. And it really is not, there's nothing in the middle. It's kind of blank, is my recollection, or something. You know, it doesn't really have a lot of. So Commissioner Tusha, particularly, and Commissioner Borgeson came up with this, which is really a pretty good deal. I goaded Commissioner Duda. I asked him where the ear of corn was in the seal, but he didn't respond to me in a way that can be discussed in public.
It's behind the house.
Is there an ear of
It's
corn?
behind the barn.
Is there an ear of corn?
Right there.
Oh my God, there is.
On the other side from the John Deere. That's great.
I stand corrected. Oh my goodness. Hey, wait a minute. I can see my house from here. No.
And we put the cow, too.
Yeah, I know. Oh my God, I love it.
No other questions or comments, please vote.
Good grief.
Good grief.
Motion passes.
Next is a presentation regarding alternative diversion by Kathy Greasy from the United Way. Hello. Greasy.
If I could give just
Grice.
give a brief, real synopsis of this. United Way, it's my privilege to serve as the county board member who attends these meetings, and it is really a dynamic meetings. The judges show up. We have a lot of things going, and court administrators as well as Kathy. And Kathy really is a remarkable woman. She has really helped. I think she's been the driving force of this, from what I can gather. She has gathered well over 100 companies that will accept people who are sent over for diversion by the court system. And so instead of sitting in our county jail, we have people who are going to work at Goodwill and doing other things like this, and companies, and sometimes jobs result as this. So it's a really positive program. Well, now their idea is to make it even better. And there's an option that they're going to be talking about that really kind of turns this diversion inward, where it says to a person that your diversion is to go get your GED. And I mean, it really turns it inside, and so that the person is not just working at one of these places stacking boxes or delivering something. They're really saying, this is how I'm going to get improved. So with that, I'd like to introduce both of them, and please give your names and your addresses and go from there.
I'm Kathy Grice at the United Way.
Be sure you speak into the meter, excuse me, the speaker.
Kathy Grice at United Way of the Midlands.
Good.
And I'm Lauren Kimball, also with the United Way of the Midlands. Thank you, Commissioners. This morning, as Commissioner Boyle was talking about, we're here to really sort of provide an update about what we're working on and where the court-referred program might be going. You guys are familiar with the program, as judges will refer folks to Kathy's office at United Way for folks who have been ordered to complete their community service hours. Typically, Kathy, most of those folks that she sees, about 60%, about 60% of those folks are referred to her for alcohol offenses, about 10% for theft. One of the interesting statistics, though, is that we noticed was about 40% of those folks are under age 25. And so we began working with the Advisory Council, which Commissioner Boyle sits on, to think about what might we do in a productive way to make those hours even more productive. So with the support of area judges, we've talked with adult probation, we launched a small test program, which would provide an alternative option for folks to complete their community service hours through work-based skills and life skills. For instance, if someone has 60 hours of community court-ordered service, they might do 30 doing typical community service projects, but they might also be working towards their GED for those hours, or they might go to Heartland Workforce Solutions and take computer skills or other sort of life skills that would enhance their workforce readiness. This has started with a small test pilot, which we anticipate will end in the fall-winter timeframe around November. And so at that point, we will come back to you with more details on the skills that those clients have received, the number of folks that went through that program. We already know that Kathy's program sees about a 90% success rate in terms of people completing their community service hours. But we're looking to make that a more constructive use of time in order to get them some skills that will hopefully prevent them from re-entering the workplace or re-entering the justice system. One thing to also note, is that Dr. Mark Fotzall does sit on our board of directors at United Way and is fully supportive of this initiative, as are the area judges that sit on that council, and we've spoken with adult probation as well, and so they are looking forward to hearing more about how this program develops. Like I said, we are talking about a small initial sort of test population. And so our hope is that we would be able to expand that population in the future. We've talked with juvenile probation with Mary Visick, and she is, eagerly anticipating some of our results as well as the offender work program through the corrections system. So that's an area for potential growth, although we see that as a long-term piece. And we're currently sort of evaluating what resources might be necessary to do that.
And I visited with him about the cost, and I kind of laid it on Joe already too, but it's not a big figure, but a big number. What are you talking about to really get this started as a pilot?
Sure. So our pilot, at least from now until November, we are absorbing that cost as part of our existing contract with Douglas County in order to sort of test the viability of this idea. Moving forward, our priority is really for a electronic case management sort of system to be tracking our clients and to do a little bit better of a sense of what skills are they developing, potentially looking into the probation system as well to see if this has any correlation to successful probation completion. So our priority would be on a computer system, and then potentially some other additional staff costs or program costs that the nonprofits that were placing these clients would incur, workbooks and things like that. So we're anticipating about $15,000 to $30,000 of additional costs for expansion. Again, that would be a figure that we would come with, to you with more concrete details about how the pilot has run.
And when would you be coming back?
Our plan would be to include that in the annual contract renewal, which typically happens in November, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Well, it would be for 2016.
Right, for 2016.
Okay,
for calendar year 2016.
It'd be coming this November or
Correct.
November 2015?
Correct. That's when the pilot would wrap up, and we would come back for consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. I see if we have any questions, I think.
Commissioner Rogers?
What's your role again with United Way?
So I'm the Director of Volunteering and Community Engagement. My name is Lauren Kimball, and Kathy Grice is the Court-Referred Community Service Program Coordinator.
Okay, so the $15,000 is all the cost it would take for the pilot?
So the pilot is no cost. We've started it, we've launched it. It is no additional cost to the county.
Right.
That is through our contract. The additional $15,000 to $30,000 would be for expansion after successful completion of that pilot.
Right, excuse me. So, but is that the total cost, or is that the share you're asking the county to pay?
We would still have to probably evaluate that piece of the total. So that's still under, we haven't completely finished the pilot, so we're not sure exactly of what the cost would be or how that would be divided amongst the stakeholders.
Okay, thanks.
But that would be information that we would be able to present to you once we have the final figures and the results to back it up.
Okay.
Commissioner Boyle?
I think to try to answer the sharing of it, United Way does, of course, provide all the space and all the things that go with it, and the money that we give doesn't begin to cover. Well, Kathy, you're not making $100,000, but it doesn't. It contributes to, but it doesn't. The money we're giving this is one of the best investments we've made, and plus it's. Initially, when I saw this program, I'll be honest, my initial thought was, why don't we move this to corrections? And when I got involved with it, I saw that this is operating as it is so well with all the participants, and it's amazing. So there is a contribution by United Way in the facilities, the telephone systems, all these things that are expensive. They do contribute. We could get some kind of a dollar figure, I suppose, but I think it's substantial. And our donation, our contribution for this diversion service is very reasonable, I think.
Is there in the pilot, are you doing any type of tracking or recidivism rates that once they go through your program, how many have either, re-entered, or if you accept them again, maybe not, or do they go into the system if they fail your program?
Sure. So we're changing, we've changed our intake and exit paperwork to begin to track some of those details. So in addition to tracking the number of skills and the types of skills that these folks are going to be completing, we're also tracking how many have already entered, how many is this a repeat offense that they're completing community service for. And we know that of the first, clients that we've been doing this for, we already know that 84 of, that there are 84 reoffenses that have come through our doors in the last month that are sort of that we've tracked through the process. But we are tracking whether they've come to us before. By November, we won't have whether they've re-entered the system because they'll have just completed their community service hours. But that is something that Kathy does track with all of her clients regularly, as well as something that we're talking about with probation.
And I guess there would be two numbers. I mean, in your diversion program, not just the pilot, because some of our dollars go to that,
Right.
not just the pilot.
I do track recidivism for just the regular community service program. I don't have the exact number. I do know that it's under 12%.
Okay.
Just for the regular community service.
And then
That comes through me.
And then is there a tracking of, you found out that they've finished all of this, and then do they go
Probation
on
has
for a job?
agreed. Yeah, probation has also agreed to give us feedback, because once they're done with their community service, I'm done with
You're
them.
done with them,
But
right.
they could still be on probation. So probation has agreed to give us updates when they're off to see if they successfully completed probation, and also do a questionnaire with them to find out how helpful both the probation officer thought it was and what the person thought, if the program was helpful for them.
And those potential 12% that are recidivizing, do you know the time frame of when? Is it 6 months, a year, or is it all
Right
over?
now, not through the pilot, just through the regular
Uh-huh.
community service, most of the recidivism is over 5 years old. They came in, a lot of times it was in the 90s or 2001, 2002.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So we'll be back after you have a successful test period, and I'm really excited about this. It's a very, very good move. And I hope that, and I'll be asking for the county board to give you some financial assistance when the time comes. Thanks a lot. Keep up the good work.
This, Commissioner Boyle, if you could work with them to try to find what that dollar amount would be, because this is the budget time,
Right.
which even though it's not renewed till November, if we're going to talk about adding, we should probably have a better idea of what we're going to be potentially looking at.
I think it would be when I was contacted about this, I said, you better come over right away because we're in a budget. And I think something in the $15,000 to $20,000 range would be reasonable. That's where I think we are.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Morgan?
I'll wait.
Oh, okay. All right. No other questions or comments on that item? Thank you for being here.
Thanks a lot.
Next, we'll move to committees, the first being the Finance. Commissioner Morgan and Kavanaugh, the first item is your budget report. Is it as presented?
It's as presented, however, we're going to have Joe give kind of a briefing. This will be my 5th budget here, and we probably have the most challenging situation that we've had in the last 5 budgets to try to put it together. And I thought it'd be good if he did it at the public meeting where it is on television for viewers to know, and suggestions are more than welcome. So, Joe, do you want to candidly give us the take?
Sure. And I'm going to go through some figures, which I think we're going to put on the screen, and they're also in your books. I have extra copies up here if any of the commissioners don't, want one, a hard copy in front of them as we go through this. And with that, I'll go to the first data page that has expense budget request. And there's approximately 30 departments within the county that we have asked for a requested budget from, and they've submitted. We are been able to roll these up within our system. We do use the Hyperion planning system. And what I thought I'd take the commissioners through right now, as you know, we gave all the departments and elected offices a target of coming in at their current modified budget plus 1.5% of their salaried and benefit cost for those department funds that have benefits in it. So with that, we rolled up, and the bottom line is basically the requested budgets are $5.4 million over target. And what I've done on this page is listed those departments that came in above their, at least $25,000 over their target. And as you look at it, you can see it's really driven, or at least 72% of it is coming from two departments. And the first is juvenile court, which is approximately $2.4 million over target and accounts for about 43% of the total overage. And I think all the commissioners are familiar with the issue there. That's where we ended the guardian ad litem contracts as of June 30th, 2015. And as it sits now, the assignments for the guardian ad litem attorney would be made by the juvenile courts. And when we had these contracts in place, the contracts covered about 80% of the attorney work in the guardian ad litem program, and 20% of it was still assigned by the courts. And so based on that 20% that's currently existing, the juvenile court estimated what it would cost to go to 100% of court assigned cost for the guardian ad litem attorneys, and it's a significant increase, and that would result in, and that's what really drives this $2.4 million in overage. And when we looked at this is something we discussed about. There's options that are going to be considered. I think there's actually a committee meeting next week to talk about different options, which would also include potentially doing another RFP and rebidding these out, incorporating key learnings that we took away from the current contract process, or the other option that we're going to discuss is to bring the whole process in-house and create up a county department with made up of attorneys that would deal exclusively with this guardian ad litem issue. So, but at this point, given that the contracts are expiring on June 30th, it's something that's going to have serious budget implications for next year.
Joe, even with those two options that you mentioned on the attorneys, we still, even in the best scenario, would have a shortfall that would probably be close to $1.4 million to $1.5 million. Would I be accurate saying that?
Yeah, anything we do is going to take a while to implement. I mean, we're seeing in the initial, right now, I talked to juvenile court, the guardian ad litem cost currently are up to about $50,000 to $60,000 a week. So it's something we're into right now and trying to deal with, but there will definitely be significant cost incurred this year, coming budget year.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Joe, based on our early budget discussions, was there any anticipation last year, earlier this year, relative to the scope of this request over target?
There was a lot of work looked at this when, the accounts were audited by the state auditor, and we always knew that there would be, a significant incremental cost, but it didn't really put the pen to paper and sit down and come from the juvenile court about how they would estimate it until we got into the budget process. So we always knew it would be more expensive. I don't think we anticipated it quite this magnitude.
not just the juvenile court expense, the overall budget picture and the revenue picture. I mean, do we project out going forward beyond this fiscal year?
Well, Commissioner, this isn't the first time we've seen this, and we had the discussion in our strategic planning process, and we kind of talked that right now, given the level of increases in property valuations, the county is facing what we've termed a structural deficit, where expenses increase at a greater rate than revenues. And, 2 years ago, we had to take a tax increase, and when we take a tax increase, it really gets phased in over 2 years, so you get 2 years of the incremental revenues. So last year was the second year of it, so we didn't really see it, but we can expect like I say, it's really structural right now, given what's going on with property valuations, that our expenses are growing greater than our revenues, which creates a deficit. And so that's something where we've been trying to deal with. And this year it's been made worse by the situation in juvenile court.
Right. Juvenile court aside, the departments that we actually control, the employee fringe benefit portion of this, which second to juvenile court only is the biggest driver of this deficit. What is that? Employee fringe benefit. What's included in that?
Well, in that account, it's really three components. It's Social Security and Medicaid fees, the payroll tax. The second component is the county's pension contribution, which is 8.5% of payroll. And really those two have been kind of tracking within our expectations. And the third piece that's really driving this is the health and medical costs, the claims. The county with over 2,100 employees and close to 5,000 covered lives is self-insured. And our claims experience that we've been paying is close to $30 million a year. And for the past few years, our health costs have been increasing at, between 8 and 10% a year, when we're targeting most things to increase at 3%. And that's driven by a couple factors. One is that overall health care costs continue to increase at high single to low double digits, and that's been general experience. And then secondly, if you look at the demographics of the county workforce, we tend to have older employees. A lot of our employees have been here a long time. If you ever look at, and we have that discussions when we look at wages, and I think we have like 70 to 80% of our employees are close to their top step, which is a sign of long tenure here. So just as a population in general, with the baby boomers aging, that tends to be our workforce. So those people do, just by the nature of aging, tend to incur larger health care claims than younger people. And so it's something that's really hard for us to deal with, especially since health care, the insurance is a subject of collective bargaining in the county contracts, and the county contracts cover close to 80% of our employees. So we've looked at this and haven't really been able to find a silver bullet on this yet in terms of controlling these costs. We're trying initiatives like the wellness initiative and things like that are fairly successful. And like I say, our cost, given who our employees are, really isn't out of line with overall experience out in the general population.
So and this was prior to my joining the board, but the rather substantial raise given to non-union employees in December of last year, what contribution does that make to this overall request over target? First of all, how much was that in aggregate?
I think it was in the terms of $400,000 to $500,000. You know, that went out to, that was a 4% increase that went out to the non-union employees, which I think are about 400 to 450 of the 2,100 employees. So we always have been targeting about 3% of that. So it was the 1% or 25% of that 500,000. So it would probably account for like 100 and 150,000 costs that hadn't been budgeted for.
And is that included in this employees' fringe benefits number?
Not really, that because the employee fringe benefit that the big driver here is on the health and medical. There is a smaller portion that would show up in increased Social Security and pension contribution, but in terms of the overall materiality, it's a contributing factor, but not the driving factor.
Okay. So we anticipate a 4.4 increase in revenues. Is that correct?
Are you jumping ahead?
The budget deficit calculation.
Okay, Sam, if you could go to the last page, we can talk about that, the budget deficit calculation. Yeah, this kind of shows that the crux of the issue is that our revenues are going to projected to increase at a 4.4% rate, while our expenses are projected to increase at a 6.5% rate. So that 2.1% differential is kind of translating to a as submitted, as requested deficit of approximately $5 million.
Okay, so when did we anticipate, when did we make this calculation that revenues would increase 4.4%?
That's based on the roll-up of the numbers. You know,
when did you make that determination?
When all the budgets were submitted. So we rolled these numbers up about 10 days ago.
The 4.4% increase in revenues, you made that determination 10 days ago?
Yes, and it's made up of two components. It's made up of the components of the revenues of the departments, which don't get submitted until the revenues are in, and then we also have to look at the projections on revenues from tax source, property tax sources, and those aren't final yet. Those we'll get the initial reading May 15th, and they'll be certified by the assessor in August. So there's a lot of projections in this. It's a moving target. And so, yeah, it certainly would be nice if we knew how much our hole was going into the process, but that's not the case.
Okay, and the earliest you can make these revenue projections is late April, early May? Is that your position there?
Well, I
just want a yes or no, Joe. I mean, I just
yeah, I mean,
get a handle on
that's when we get the numbers.
Okay, so late April, early May last year, you would have had a projection on revenues going forward.
We would have had the projection for the current year that we're in, yes.
And what was that projection?
Last year, we were able to have a balanced budget because the second half of the tax increase from the previous year came in, and so when that incremental revenue from the tax increase comes in, it would cover what I would call the structural deficit that would have expenses growing faster than revenues.
Perhaps I wasn't clear. I'm asking about last year's projected revenue. Increase, decrease, stay the same. A year ago, right now, this number, which was a projection that you make presumably annually, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. What was that number a year ago? What was that projection a year ago?
I don't have it right in front of me, but my guess, if I remember doing last year's budget, they were both increasing, my guess is 3 to 4%.
Okay.
It's close, I think 3. A little tough to have all these numbers in your head, Joe, even though
that was last year, right? We're okay for this year. We're going to come in on the year fine, and so like I say, I could pull that number and certainly give it to you, but I don't have it directly in front of me.
That'd be good. You know, where I'd like to go with this going forward is, you know, to do as much as we can in terms of strategic forecasting going forward, so that we're not, you know, kind of surprised or whatever in the midst of our annual budget process. And this data exists going back. And so you could do projections based on historical data. The governments on every other level do that. And so that's kind of where I would go with this thing, is try to get as early a projection going forward of not only this year, but next year and following year, maybe even out to 4 or 5 years.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, Commissioner Kavanaugh, I know that you're new, but we did do that strategic planning process probably close to a year and a half or 2 years ago, and that's where, and I can remember we had the presentation, we had a pretty big discussion on this structural deficit issue, which is that the way things are going right now is we have this kind of reoccurring issue, and it's, you know, the key driver, our key source of revenue is property tax valuations, and if property tax valuations can continue to be growing at a slow, you know, until this year, over the past 5 years, they had averaged an increase of under 1%, and that's the county's primary source of funding. And so if we have labor costs and other costs that might be increasing at a rate of, let's say, 3%, and we have revenues increasing at 1%, boom, here's that 2% shortfall that we're kind of looking at this year. And it's a very tough issue that I think we've discussed, and we haven't really been, like I say, there is no silver bullet here on how to solve this, but it's not a new problem, and it's a problem that's been discussed before.
So when this strategic planning initiative was held, you say a year or two ago, were there projections going into the future, strategic projections of anticipated increases in revenue and expenses as part of that strategic initiative?
Yeah, we knew that revenue, that expenses were increasing greater than revenues, and probably in this 2 to 3% range.
And I understand it's, you know, projecting is an imprecise science, but did those projections take the form of, well, next fiscal year, maybe revenues would increase 3 to 4%. The following fiscal year, maybe 2 to 3%, et cetera, et cetera. And expenses the same way. Were there actual numbers put with those projections in the strategic initiative?
They were, can I jump in? Because this has been talked about for almost 5 years, I think. And we knew that each year that $5 million, we termed it a structural deficit, was there. We had all the budgets. That's how let me back up. That's how the call letter is crafted on what to ask for. Once those budgets come in, as you can see, many of the departments and offices go above what the ask was. So then we sit back and say, okay, now what? But you can go back and look at those budgets, and that $5 million deficit is talked about, and it was talked about at the strategic planning, and that's where the tax increase conversation started to take place, where we knew we would be able to take care of that structural deficit with that tax increase. But again, it was only going to be for 2 years, and we knew that, and we talked about that coming back, that this would be the year where we would be back at the beginning of seeing that $5 million structural deficit, and there it is. So yes, it has been talked about, yes, it has been projected, and yes, we had the one solution of the tax increase over that 2-year period. So now we're back to...
Right, and it might be something that we're certainly going through department by department. Some departments have different histories, but it might be something that would inform us going forward on things that we have very immediate control of. For instance, in the increase that we gave to non-union employees last December, we might be informed in those kinds of decisions that before we're able to do a 4% increase for these people, that it would come down to very shortly thereafter this discussion where we're $5,400,000 off. And I understand Joe correctly, 400,000 is about the amount of that increase that was given last December. Those types of things, I mean, I'm talking about anticipating future impact of current budgets and decisions.
I'm going to mention one thing, and some other commissioners may correct me on this, but that 4%, the reason for that was we'd been going through 1% increases the previous 2 years for sure, and secondly, the county attorney and some others, that was necessary when we saw what was taking place. Some other commissioners recall that, and I'm sure they all do. That was a reason for that, because they had been falling behind. There was some feeling that they were definitely going to move forward with the union, which would cause us a greater increase than that, and that's our reasoning. If I'm incorrect, I want one of the other commissioners to correct me, because I know you weren't here then.
Yeah. Commissioner Duda?
Thank you. Typically, I am skeptical of the value of strategic planning. We did do strategic planning, and we have made projections, but I don't think that our county assessor, Dan Battiato, can give us a very accurate handle of how much valuations are going to rise next year, let alone in 3, 4, 5 years, and that is the biggest driver. When I look at things like our guardian ad litem contract that we chose to sever, I couldn't have projected how much that was going to cost us, because I thought we were working with the legislature and that they were going to help us find a solution to this $2 million plus deficit that we created. And the only solution they gave us was, oh, just tell the judges this is what you're going to pay and leave it at that. Wrong. Doesn't work that way. I didn't see that deficit coming. I don't know how anybody can at all accurately look down 2, 3, 4, 5 years and predict what we're going to do, what property valuations are going to do. It's a moving target. We understand that every year we have this structural deficit, that every year we're going to have a problem balancing our budget. That's just the way it is. But I don't know, and to pin this on the 4% raise to the non-union employees, I don't think is very fair, because we were just trying to keep them equitable with the union. I don't want to separate out one group over the other of union versus non-union and say it's their fault. The blame comes to us. We have the job of managing this. But so many of these things are very difficult to project. And even now going forward into this budget, what are we going to do with the guardian ad litem contract? And it looks like we may be trying to do something mid-year. What's that going to save us? What are we going to do? How do you strategically project what our increased costs are going to be on that, let alone, I mean, just this year, let alone years down the road?
Thank you. Commissioner Boyle?
Well, this is really another old horse that deserves another beating. Bring it on. What of these, Joe, what of these expenditures that you presented on the first page, which ones of those are non-mandated? Which ones are services that we provide that we don't have to? Because the trouble with that is that many of those are the ones that are driving to save tax dollars. I mean, diversion and all sorts of other things that we do. So it's a loaded gun. You know, if we cut those, then we're going to be in trouble because it kicks in other expenses. I don't know whether there's any opportunity or makes any sense to look at those with an eye toward what are we required to do and what could we possibly cut. I have my usual list of suspects that I'm not going to bring up, but the first one starts with the letter E, so as an extension. But anyway,
You weren't going to say it.
I wasn't going to say it, but I had to. Anyway, I just suggest that. I don't even know if that's a possibility, but I am not in favor of voting to increase taxes. There's just got to be some way to come out of this. I'm not sure that there is. I did last year and I think I was probably the swing vote. But I think we need to try to find some other economies. That the group has done really a good job. Joe has as well. But I think maybe now is the time that we really are at a point where we have to come up with some way to try to cut expenditures.
Commissioner Morgan?
I'm going to yield to Laura because she's been standing there, and then I'll come back if that's
I'll leave
okay.
it on. Yep, I'll leave it on.
Laura McCormick, 7414 Valley. I guess all I would say is, Commissioner Kavanaugh, I actually do recall some of these discussions around the increases for the county attorney, because believe it or not, even though I'm a citizen, I actually did attend a lot of those meetings. I would politely suggest that maybe you reach out to Doug Kagan and the Taxpayers for Freedom. I was a member of a group of citizens that tried to put together a white paper where some of these topics were discussed, and I don't think that it's any new news. I, as a citizen, knew that there was a very serious structural problem in terms of the financing of all of the programs that the county operates. So I'm saddened to hear that this is something that I guess you didn't know, but perhaps you could maybe reach out to Doug Kagan and some of those folks, and I would certainly be happy as your constituent to participate in that conversation, and maybe we could bring you up to speed. In terms of the guardian ad litem issue, as you know, that is something I have very strong feelings about. I would have to disagree, Commissioner Duda. I think that this is something that's been widely known. The fact that we were going to be looking at very significant fees unless the law was changed, that to me again is something that is old news. I had really hoped that the legislature would give us a clearer path in terms of options besides attorneys. I personally think, while I understand that this is a very lucrative business for lawyers in our county, it might not be statewide, but it certainly is in our county, and they protect their business to the detriment of children. I think that there needs to be some other approach to how we're going to manage and handle these cases. The last thing I'll say is I was dismayed. I was sitting just observing a random case last week in juvenile court, and once again I'm sitting there scratching my head as to what is taking place before me. It is so at odds with so many of the reform initiatives that we have in our county, with detentions, alternatives. Once again, I'm watching a kid be shipped off, risk assessment tools overridden, and the kid is going to be incarcerated in the DCYC, because let's face it, that's what it is. Even though the child is a low-risk offender, he was a kid that should not be sent home. I don't know how we change some of those cultural problems, but I think that the dialogue has to happen, and it can't always be sunshine and roses. You have to be willing to listen to people like myself and other people that are watching what is really going on, and it frequently is at odds with what these high-level 50,000-foot views are. So I would be happy to share this paper with you, Commissioner Kavanaugh, and I think it really might be of help to you. Doug Kagan, too. So thank you.
Commissioner Morgan?
One of the things that's so difficult is we all know there's a legislative bill that will cancel out some property taxes most likely, and those again are things that we don't anticipate, and we are so dependent just on property taxes, and it really makes it difficult. And of course there's more, as Commissioner Boyle points out often, there's more and more that we have the legislature changing that creates other shortfalls that aren't anticipated or expected also. And that's difficult.
Yes, it is. Commissioner Kraft?
Yes, and this is the compounding effect of not taking fiscal action when fiscal action needed to be taken 5 or 6 years ago. It was apparent that we were going to put ourselves in a position where we couldn't sustain the tax level we were at, but we refused to raise it. And when we did raise it, it was not enough to stymie future deficits. you know, we had the $5 million financial burden from denial of state revenue, or the Governor Heinemann taking state revenue from us. Added onto the burden, we had increases in expenses in health care. We've had the union contracts. I saw this coming, and I've seen it coming since we denied that 2% 5 or 6 years ago, which would have a tax increase, which would have, I said 2%, 2 mil or 2 cents. Okay, thank you. Had we done that appropriately, we wouldn't have this compounding effect that is cinching us at the waist so hard that we can't get the corset tied. Thank you.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Well, I appreciate the discussion, and Joe, the work that you've done on this. The revenue projections, you put that up there for us for a second? The type of events that I think Commissioner Kraft was referring to are particularly difficult to anticipate. I believe the treasurer's decrease of $670,000 is due to a Supreme Court decision. Is that correct?
Yes, that we never saw coming. It wasn't even, we weren't even a party to that.
And as much control as we have none over the Supreme Court. The clerk of the district courts, $66,000 decrease.
I think that's a reduction in Title IV funding.
What's Title IV?
It's federal money.
Okay. And the Assessor Register of Deeds, $32,500 decrease in revenue from last year is?
That's just lower transactional fees on properties through the Register of Deeds office.
Okay. We can also anticipate revenue projections coming out of this legislative session if we anticipate the passage, which seems likely, of bills like LB 14 dealing with the Woodman Tower assessment. And I don't know if you have an approximate number of dollars that would cost us, Joe?
I think we looked at the county portion of being around 150,000.
Yeah, 162.
160. Yeah.
And then the other thing we need to keep in mind, and I'm just being candid, the other thing you may see is going back 2 years, which would also create an additional amount on that same if the bill passes.
Oh, yeah. Potential.
Yeah, that would have to be paid out of reserves, right?
But then that creates another problem because reserves are at a certain level that we have to be cautious about also. So,
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Well, that said, I'd invite everybody to come up to the Finance Committee hearing immediately after this so that we could go over this in much more detail. But at that, we will at least have some good news, I believe, from the county clerk, who's reduced his budget by 13% since 2009. And that type of fiscal conservatism should be commended and emulated throughout the county. If we had that belt tightening county-wide, we wouldn't be having the discussion that we're having right now. Thank you.
You're not related to the county clerk, are you?
Commissioner Morgan?
Was that a rhetorical?
No, just wanted to check. Do we have executive session today? We do have. So we'll be a while before we go up there. I just wanted to mention that.
And if I could just say one thing, this, Commissioners, you got to remember, this is the requested budget, so we really have not gone back and reviewed this in a lot of detail and made any reductions yet. You know, the last time this happened, we had a $5 million deficit. We went back and we cut it by 40% or $2 million. So this, in my mind, is almost a worst case, and there's work to be done, and that's why it's called a budget update. I just wanted to present to everyone the magnitude of the issue we're dealing with.
Commissioner Boyle?
A comment about the Women of the World event. I am the only commissioner who supported their request for tax exemption, even though I passed when it came up for a vote on the bill. One of the things that's kind of weird that's happening, the governor, and this started with the previous administration, puts together a bundle of money and then notifies all the property taxpayers that, you're getting this reduction, and I think it's $45 for a $150,000 home, which won't even pay half the bill for Cox Cable for 1 month. But anyhow, we get that. And it's $100-some million, And Senator Tom White tried to restrict it so that corporations didn't get this rebate because they don't give a damn about this. It doesn't mean anything to them. They're focused on income taxes and stuff like that. Well, the quirk of all of this is that Women of the World will be getting a rebate on property taxes. And I wonder whether, how does that work? I'm in favor of them with their nonprofit status, but I think them getting a refund is a little bit over the top. So I wonder whether we should ask someone in Lincoln to say, please take a look at this. Is this something that you think is appropriate? Because I guess they'd be getting back, what, $800,000 or something? So just a comment. And so any friends I had at Women of the World, that's trash.
Thank you. Nothing else on Finance Committee?
No, sorry for so long.
No, that's fine.
Chair.
That's good that we got an update. And then you wanted to say something on Administrative Services?
Yes, very quickly. Administrative Services is scheduling a committee hearing for late May, early June. Date to be announced.
Okay. And then Criminal Justice, there's one item, authorized affiliation agreement between North Omaha Area Health of Nebraska and Douglas County Department of Corrections to provide health care education, screening, and linkages to care in the community of Omaha. And here with us today.
Thank you.
Still good morning.
Good morning. My name is Ira Combs, 5620 Ames Avenue. I'm the Executive Director of North Omaha Area Health, also known as NOAA. I have another hat. I'm also the Nurse Coordinator for the University of Nebraska Medical Center. This pilot project we're doing doesn't cost the county anything. I've heard a lot of that this morning. Doesn't cost you a nickel. The Department of Health and Human Services allowed us a grant that we will do a rapid hepatitis C screening at Douglas County, and Director Foxhall and Captain Early have been very, very cooperative in helping us through this process. The population that goes through Douglas County is at a high risk for hepatitis C. The good news about hepatitis C, if you could say it is, there is actually a drug now that cures hepatitis C. Used to be hepatitis C, you would take a whole long life of interferon and other drugs like that. Well, this pill actually cures it. And so what we are doing is screening people, rapid test, for hepatitis C antibodies, and if it's positive, we do another confirmatory test. And this is all paid for by the Department of Health and Human Services. And what we do is we actually navigate the person that has an active virus to a provider. And we've had some providers at the Nebraska, well, they change their name all the time, at University of Nebraska Medical Center, that are doctors that are actually seeing patients that have no insurance and are helping them get the treatment. And so we're kind of the intermediary. If you look on the back of that thing I just gave you, that's about our program, North Omaha Area Health, and everything we do, we offer it. We have a staff of all volunteers. Until recently, we just got a grant from a foundation here in town where we're going to have a youth health advocate program, and we'll start getting paid now for some of the volunteer work we do. And so today we're here just because we had needed an official affiliate agreement with you guys because we were actually, our staff is actually in the correction center, probably starting sometime this week, doing the rapid hepatitis C for the first 300 or inmate or people that are incarcerated there.
Very good. Thank you for
You
that
left me up here all by
update.
myself?
Is there a motion to approve this agreement? Is there any questions or comments on the agreement? Or for Mr., what was your last name again?
Combs.
Combs.
Yeah.
You had us at no cost to the county.
Yeah. I saw you smile when I said that.
Please vote.
Good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will be back.
Yes, good, great, thank you.
Commissioner Morgan? Motion passes.
Last committee is the legislative, HR resources, human resources, weekly personnel report from civil service as presented, if no one has any questions or comments on that. Weekly CAO report on staff assaults.
Patrick had to step out, but he told me to say that there have been none reported.
Okay. And then you do have your legislative update in your packet from our lobbyist. And of course, we've already talked about one of the big ones was the LB 414. There is ongoing, I'm supposed to pass this out. There was ongoing movement on 605. And we continue to press forward with the senators about our cost and the shift that we feel is going to occur with 605. We asked for some language to be inserted, and the second one I'm passing out is the language that we asked to be submitted as an amendment. And the second one was what Senator Mello has agreed to put in. That is good. It gives us what we want, but it doesn't give us the language per se to take away the grant funds and make it a reimbursement. So he, again, I guess heard us, I should say. When Commissioner Boyle was with him the other day, I think that was very good that you were able to take him through our facility and again hear from our director and staff over there as to what the domino effect is going to be. So this is going to be filed, or it was filed by Senator Mello. So according to the speaker that I heard this morning was that 605 was going to start at 10 o'clock. And I don't have an update yet as to what actually occurred. The second one is the one that says...
is the per diem the second one or the first one?
The per diem's the first one.
Okay.
The second one is the one that says introduced by Mello. So if anything good, drastic change during that debate while we were here, we'll get word to you as soon as we can. Anybody else want anything to say on 605? Commissioner Boyle?
Thanks, Sam. Very briefly, yesterday I was quite surprised at the length of time that Senator Mello gave us. I expected, initially we're supposed to meet at a restaurant to have coffee, and I said, can we meet at Corrections instead? And I think it was very successful. Heath is a very open-minded person. We've been political allies for a long time, and so we agree basically on issues. And you know what I was really pushing for was for the an amendment to say that they would pay all the cost involved, and they said that's not going to happen. So, but the offshot of this was that our director did a terrific job, as did Mr. Huber too as well. We went through the facility, showed him everything, including the very high secure areas where the high profile first class murderers are housed, and the tense, there was a tenseness in the air that wasn't present in other parts of the jail. We also saw the place, the sally ports, where they bring in prisoners and the kind of things that happen with, and there were some cruisers there, so it was a lively thing. We had a woman who was acting up, who was having a psychotic experience, and she was screaming throughout the area where we were touring, and she eventually was moved to an area. It showed, and as we walked through there, you saw people working on trying to get her care. It was extremely useful, and Senator Mello said he was astounded at what that procedure is all about, the extent of the operation. So what this is leading to is that I'm going to ask Senator Mello and others, I suppose, too, to get us a half a dozen senators or so who will come to Omaha, who will come through our facility, who will become familiar with what it is, and so that when things like this, these issues come up, they'll have some familiarity. I don't know what he expected. I don't know what people think this is. If you're from Loop City, do you think it's a 3-cell operation with the jailer sitting in the hallway? It's not what we have. Right now, I think we have 38 people accused of first-degree murder in our facility, which is quite unusual. You referred to it earlier. And if this bill passes, we only know what's going to be coming and how it's going to change things. It is going to be a really dramatic change to this, the whole operation, which is no one ever anticipated.
Right, exactly. The other one to note that took up quite a lot of discussion was Senator Schumacher tried to tack on to Senator Morante's bill that would require the voter identification, the secret ballot envelope that he wanted, and he was very dramatic in expressing how mad he was at counties that we were complaining about the additional costs that this was going to incur. And so it failed, and the other bill advanced, but just so you know that he's kind of angry at us about that. So it was interesting to watch, though. The other one, outside of this report, I had put on last week asking if this board would take a position in support of LB 294, which is adopting the Human Trafficking Victim Civil Remedy Act. I have just learned of this bill and its full contents because I recently was appointed to the Human Trafficking Task Force and had our first meeting on April 23rd. And I think it's important, just because of the issue itself, that we take a position in support on this bill, even though we're kind of late to the game and the bill's moved on. But I would like to be on record in support of it if the board would so choose. Is there a second?
Second.
Please vote.
Motion passes.
And then Marcos handed out to us an updated kind of where we are with certain bills that were ours of most interest. So you can read that at your leisure as well. And I'll give you any updates that I hear later on today from what happened this morning. We do have executive session for what?
I just said
Labor negotiation.
one thing from Marcos. How long do you think that executive might go?
What is it for? Labor negotiation? Probably a half hour?
As long as the commissioners would like it to go.
We'll say a half hour. So we'll be done at 10. Let's go quarter after we'll be done, and then we'll start the finance a half hour after that. So quarter to 1.
If we could.
Or 1. You want to just go straight up 1?
Yeah, let's see how it goes, but let's plan on 1.
All right.
Just one last thing on the legislative front. I think we will be informed by a session-ending report I've asked Marcos to prepare relative to the overall fiscal impact in dollars of legislation to us, Douglas County. And so at the end of the session, hopefully we will have a pretty good projection that we can go forward with relative to, are we getting more, less, or the same in dollars as a result of legislation and the budget out of this legislative session.
That'll be good.
Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, I have a bill that I'd like to bring up and ask us to consider supporting it, and it's LB 586, which protects people from workplace discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. This bill is really interesting. It's frankly a complete reversal from what took place about 3 years ago when the City Council was preparing an ordinance that protected people who in these classifications from workplace discrimination, and it failed the first time through. It passed the second time. I'm proud to say I was the only public official who came down here and testified in favor of it. What has happened is it's today in the Omaha World-Herald there's quite a lengthy editorial talking about the good things that come from this kind of protection, that it does let people know that they're welcome. All the major corporations in Omaha have these policies. They don't discriminate, and they welcome people and welcome the diversity in the workforce and what they contribute, not based on their lifestyle and so forth and their gender identity. In this editorial today, it talks about the success of the Omaha ordinance, that there have been very few complaints brought by people. And our own Civil Service Commission, I asked them to model something out so that we could change that as well and add that to our protections. And they have, I believe, taken the language and prepared something, but they decided to wait to see what happens in Lincoln. And the support for this is incredible. Mr. Lauritsen, who's affiliated with the First National Bank, a young man, has taken the lead on this and called how important this is to get this enacted. And of course, our good allies, the Omaha Chamber of Commerce and the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce and so forth, are also out front on this. So I think it's time for us to acknowledge, we've been in a safe place for a long time. I think it's time for us to acknowledge that we welcome all people without exception, that we're not judging them on their lifestyle or who they are. So I would ask that I'm asking for support that it be communicated to Lincoln. There's a huge number of senators who've signed on to this bill, LB 586. So I would make a motion that we communicate to the sponsor of this legislation that we support the passage.
I will second that.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Michael, what's the number on the bill?
586.
Marcos, could you tell us where 586 is?
Marcos San Martin, Douglas County Administration. Yeah, Commissioner, LB 586, it's presented by Senator Moorfield, and it is on general file right now in the legislature, so it is out of committee.
Who's the sponsor?
Senator Moorfield.
Didn't Pansy Brooks make it her priority?
And yes, you are correct. Senator Pansy Brooks did make it a priority bill.
I share your sentiments, Michael, and be happy to join you on.
Thank you. I think it's, this is not, maybe some of us feel uncomfortable because of whatever our own backgrounds may be, but I have long supported these folks in their quest for being treated fairly and not being discriminated against because of who they are. So I hope that we can support this. I appreciate, Mr. Kavanaugh, your comments.
Any further comments or questions? Please vote.
Motion passes.
Any other?
Thank you very much.
Legislative items? Okay. Seeing none, we will need a motion to go into executive session for labor negotiations. Is there a second?
Second.
Please vote.
Motion passes.
So we're not going to...
Motion passes. Thanks. You want me to...
For purple mountain majesty above the fruited plain, America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.